Thank you. Yeah. Touch me there, Neil. Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening and for taking the time to mark this, the 20th anniversary of Robin Cook's passing, by joining this lecture in his memory. Before we begin, I'd like to say a few thank yous to those who've made this evening possible. Firstly, my good friend and mentor, Neil Lawson, from Compass, for having faith in me tonight. Let's see if you still have that faith by the end of the speech, but nonetheless, thank you for that. I'd also like to thank Sue Goss, Sandy Martin, and John Denham in advance for their contributions this evening. Also to Greg Power for his wonderful introduction, as well as Meg Russell, Mary Southcott, Mary Cowdor, and Adam Finlayson for their insights. And finally, a big shout out to Sarah in my office and Luke Lehner and the Compass team who've pulled it all together and made tonight possible. Being asked to deliver this lecture has been one of the proudest moments of my time as a Member of Parliament. And I'll be honest, I have felt the weight of that responsibility. All self-imposed, but real nonetheless. The pressure tonight is not just about honouring Robin Cook's memory, as important as that is. It's also his political insight and integrity. It's about asking what that memory and his legacy demand of all of us now. We are living through a moment of profound political crisis, where the very idea of integrity in public life, the very idea, never felt more urgent to hold on to and to live up to. Just last weekend, nearly 200,000 people marched through London under the banner of Unite the Kingdom. I know that because I was in my office writing this speech, and I was rather taken aback by it. Some waved Union Jacks, others carried something darker. The world's richest man, not even a citizen of our country, invited those people to do nothing less than subvert the British Constitution and to fight back or die. But what struck me most wasn't the banners, but the faces. Not the loudest agitators, but the thousands of ordinary men and women, many on a protest for the first time. Not the superstars of the global right, Steve Bannon and Elon Musk, but the people there who we might know from our own day-to-day lives. There was someone at that demonstration that I know. One of my oldest school friends. He was there. We grew up together on the same council estate. He told me he wasn't there for Hopkins or Bannon, but because the government doesn't listen, Clive. He said that he wants to feel proud of his country again. He's not a racist or a fascist, but he is hungry for belonging. And he isn't alone. And that should chill us. It chills me. When ordinary, decent people begin looking for pride and meaning in movements led by grifters and authoritarians calling for violence, we aren't just coming into dangerous territory, we're already lost deep within it. When Musk spoke, he didn't rant. He spoke calmly, persuasively, about protecting the vulnerable. But woven through his words were the seeds of something darker, a politics of vengeance dressed up as common sense. But that isn't the worst of it. That isn't the heart of the problem. You see, at precisely the moment we need leaders able to unpick the lies and to challenge the politics of the rich and powerful who would take our democracy, our own leaders are failing to rise to the occasion, even to recognize the depth of the crisis we're in. As Hannah Arendt warned, when people no longer know what to believe, they stop believing in anything at all. And that is when authoritarianism becomes possible. Where is our government? Where is the leadership this moment demands? Where are the voices for truth? We can look, but all we see is a Prime Minister fighting for his political life over the appointment of Peter Mandelson, a serial offender in the revolving door culture that has corroded trust in politics for a generation, that was so intensely relaxed about the filthy rich, as Mandelson once said, that it has been blind to the crimes they use their wealth and power to get away with. This, then, is why integrity matters. And so, looking for that leadership, I look to Robin Cook. Robin Cook showed us what integrity looks like. The courage to speak the truth when it's inconvenient, even at the cost of office. And that is why we are here tonight, to reflect on a man who, when the truth was under siege, like it is now, chose to defend it, and who knew politics without integrity is incapable of defending the truth. When it was announced that I would deliver this lecture, my team posted about it on social media. The responses were overwhelmingly positive. But one thread struck me. Someone asked whether Robin Cook could really be considered a great man, given that he was, in her words, a fallible man who had made mistakes in his personal life. Others replied that those flaws didn't erase his political achievements, nor the integrity he brought to public life. That goes to the heart of what we expect from politics. Do we demand moral perfection, or do we prize courage and honesty in decisive moments? I believe we must choose the latter. Waiting for perfect people to enter politics is like waiting for a wealth tax from this Labour government. The measure of a politician is not whether they are flawless, but whether they use the power entrusted to them with courage and integrity when it matters most. Too often, our media confuse this issue. They demand perfection while delighting in knocking down good people. They stoke cynicism. They thrive from deepening the sense that they're all the same. This corrodes democracy. It drives good people out of public life and leaves the field to those with the thickest skin and the weakest moral compass. Robin Cook, for all his flaws, refused to play that game. He accepted that integrity would cost him, but he knew it was the only way politics could retain meaning. And that integrity wasn't improvised. It was forged over years through small decisions, moral tests, and moments when he chose to hold the line. From my own experience, knowing when to do that is one of the hardest things in politics. If I'm honest, it's agony sometimes, waiting to do the right thing when every instinct, every whip, every press headline and career calculation is screaming at you to do otherwise. But I'm fortunate. I have a good team around me who never shy away from laying out the moral stakes. My friend Neil Lawson once told me something I've never forgotten. Every compromise with your values becomes another bar in the cage that awaits every politician in the future. Build enough bars, and eventually you find yourself in a prison of your own making. I tell myself that most weeks. That is why Cook's life is worth examining tonight. Not because he was perfect, but because he shows us that greatness and fallibility can coexist, and that integrity is always a choice. Robin Finlayson Cook grew up in post-war Scotland as an only child, raised with a strong sense of duty and frugality. On a rare trip to London, his parents left him to explore Hamley's toy shop. When they returned and asked the salesman if they'd seen him, the man replied, "Is that the little lad with the Scots accent who keeps asking the price of everything?" That small boy grew into a man with the same relentless curiosity, always asking what things cost, who paid, and who benefited. Cook loved ideas and words, writing book reviews and steeping himself in history before politics. He was also a man of passions, a keen horseman and racing enthusiast, eventually writing a regular newspaper column and racing tips. Indeed, he once compared party management to the reins of a horse. The reins are there to get the animal balanced, and then you get it to jump most things. The reins aren't there to check enthusiasm, but to channel it. Compare that to today's party management, where it's the whip that dominates and the jockey channels us nowhere. Cook entered Parliament in 1974 as MP for Edinburgh Central. In 1978, just 4 years in, he introduced a private members' bill to give the public greater access to official information, decades before the Freedom of Information Act. That instinct for transparency never left him. Cook understood that democracy only works when citizens can see what is done in their name. He also knew that politics meant hard choices. For much of the 1970s, he threw himself into unilateral disarmament campaigns. But as part of Neil Kinnock's modernising project, he helped Labour move to multilateralism, a shift that cost him friends on the left and gave ammunition to critics on the right. But this was Cook at his most characteristic, refusing purity politics, but also refusing to surrender his moral compass. He lived in the space between, a space many in this room will know well, criticised by both left and right, balancing pragmatism with principle. And this is crucial. That balancing act wasn't weakness, but the greatest strength. It was, and still is, politics at its most serious. This is the seesaw the Labour Party has rarely been able to balance, adapting to the world as it is, while holding fast to the world we wish to create. Robin Cook spent his career at that fulcrum, and it forged the integrity that one day would see him resign rather than endorse a disastrous war built on a false prospectus. Before entering Parliament, Cook was a strong advocate of Scottish devolution, declaring it was essential to let the people decide. I can't do a Robin Cook accent, so that's the best you can get. But once elected, he changed his mind, warning that devolution risked fueling nationalism. He argued nationalism is a romantic escape from the blunt truth that only a major reordering of the priorities of our society will provide a decent environment for every citizen. But the Thatcher landslides changed that calculation. Scotland, which consistently voted Labour, was being governed by a party it had rejected. Cook concluded power needed to be closer to the Scottish people. He put it bluntly, "I don't give a bugger if Thatcher has a mandate or not. I will simply do all I can to stop her." Cook's example speaks to us now. You cannot face a democratic crisis by retreating into command and control. You meet it with adaptability and imagination, but always anchored in the goal of empowering people. That was his guiding North Star. Cook was trusted across the Labour political spectrum. He was a Bevanite by instinct, but often acted as kingmaker in the Tribune Group, working to bring factions together. Progress co-founder Derek Draper once recalled that during an interview for a job in the party, he told Robin that a joint NEC slate between Tribune and the Socialist Campaign Group was ridiculous, only to remember halfway through it had been Cook's idea. Cook simply said, I have a slightly different view, but that needn't affect matters. Draper got the job. That was Cook, not sectarian, not paranoid about loyalty, willing to work with people he disagreed with to build something stronger. A spirit from which our party could learn so much today. Cook believed pluralism wasn't a weakness, but Labour's superpower, the ability to contain multitudes and still move forwards together. Compare that with today's Labour Party. Candidate selections micromanaged, local members overruled, MPs treated as merely constitutional necessities and a nuisance, and policies dropped or announced without so much as a debate. Cook's reins analogy, balance before the jump, has been twisted. Today, the reins aren't there to steady the horse. They're yanked tight to stop it running at all. If we're serious about facing down the authoritarian right, then we must do more than simply govern. We must rebuild the political culture that Robin believed in, both internally for Labour and externally for our country. That means a culture where debate is welcomed, not feared, where members are trusted, not managed, where the public are involved, not ignored, and where we measure our strength, not by how tightly we grip the reins, but by how many we can bring with us over the jump. A culture of shared endeavour is not weakness. It is our greatest strength. It is the one thing the Farages, the Robinsons, the Trumps of this world cannot match or counterfeit. A movement of people bound not by fear, but by hope, by solidarity, by the belief that together we can build something better. Cook supported Labour's modernisation programme, but by the 90s he had begun to worry about its speed and scale. He warned in private, with real prescience, that abandoning the poorest would invite the rise of a fascist movement. Karl Polanyi once wrote that when markets become disembedded from society, when land, labour, and even life itself are treated as commodities, society pushes back. Cook could see the backlash coming. Modernisation was meant to be Labour's great rebalancing act, standing at the fulcrum between 70s socialism and 1980s neoliberalism. The so-called third way promised to take the best of both, tempering the market with social justice. But New Labour moved away from that fulcrum. As deregulation took hold, as the state shrank, as democratic control withered and corporate power advanced, the balance disintegrated. Institutions that even Thatcher never dared touch were swept away or remade beyond recognition. What began as economic liberalisation soon ate into the social and cultural fabric of the nation. Once, millions of us watched the BBC's Generation Game together and talked about it on Monday morning. Even I remember that as a kid. Now we stream Netflix alone in algorithmic silos. And we watch news feeds curated to suit the interests of foreign billionaires who call for violence on our streets. Football, once affordable and rooted in community pride, is now millionaires playing for the profitability of billionaires. The NHS, the post office, the railways, once the shared institutions that bound us together, have been chipped away, run down, or sold off, leaving people disconnected and powerless. That disconnection is no longer confined to the margins. As we saw last weekend, it is drawing in the anxious middle, people who may never have marched before, and turning alienation into rage. And why wouldn't they be? Privatisation has turned essential services into cash machines for shareholders. Water companies dump sewage into our rivers while paying out billions in dividends. Energy giants post record profits as bills soar. Food prices are inflated by monopolies and shameless price gouging. And the British state, once capable of building railways, reservoirs, and hospitals, now can't even lay a brick without first signing a cheque to consultants. No wonder people such as my old school friend see an unaccountable them profiting off the misery of the rest of us. But instead of reversing course, this Labour government is doubling down. Just this week, inviting firms like Palantir and BlackRock to carve up what's left of our public realm. That isn't renewal, that is liquidation. If this government continues to prop up a catastrophically failing economic system, tinkering at the edges while leaving the structures of extraction intact, it will not restore faith in politics. It will feed the very forces that threaten our democracy. What a contrast with Robin Cook, whose life reminds us that Labour's mission was never to win power for its own sake, but rather to transform our polity in line with our values. His warning was stark. Change without justice drifts towards the very forces it set out to oppose. Nowhere was that clearer than on constitutional matters. Cook described having an epiphany about electoral reform, while watching Margaret Thatcher tell David Frost that PR would mean no more Conservative governments ever. He thought, yes, exactly. In 2005, in an article for the Labour campaign for electoral reform, Cook warned that if Labour failed to reform the voting system, it would find itself back in opposition. In 2010, he was proven right, and we endured 14 years of Conservative rule on a minority vote. Labour's 2024 landslide was a shallow, loveless victory. No government has been elected on a lower share of the vote. Millions of votes were tactical, and now polling shows voters drifting towards Greens, Lib Dems, and Independents. I'd have said your party, but it's got a few problems, so we won't go there. PR, we now know, would turn that fragmentation into representation, making difference part of the solution rather than a pretext for division. This isn't just technical, it's moral. When people feel their votes don't count, they stop voting. And when they stop voting, they stop believing. It isn't too late for Labour to legislate for PR in this Parliament. Doing so would send a signal that we trust the public with real power over their own future. Because here's the truth. If we don't change the system will change us, and we might not like what that change looks like. I come now to what is best described as the political crescendo of Robin's all too brief life. Cook would always be remembered for one of the most courageous moments in modern British politics, his resignation over the Iraq War. Indeed, our good friend John Denham here tonight on the panel also resigned as a minister on that very same matter. And let me just say, John, how proud and how much respect I have you for doing for that. I think he deserves a round of applause for that as well. He's still there. As Foreign Secretary, Cook declared Britain's policy would have an ethical dimension, leading to tougher rules on arms sales, human rights advocacy, and peace negotiations in Sierra Leone and the Balkans. But then came Iraq. By 2003, the case for war was collapsing. Cook could have gone along with it, but he didn't. It's worth pausing here. Cook knew what this resignation meant. He knew it would end his career at the very top. But he believed that if the public were being asked to endorse a war built on a lie, someone had to say that was the case. With forensic precision and extraordinary calm, he dismantled the government's case, carving it up like a Sunday joint, then asking them if they wanted seconds. He eviscerated them, and in so doing reminded Parliament there was no smoking gun, no imminent threat, no UN mandate, just a rush to an illegal war. And when he sat down, the Commons did something it almost never does. It gave him a standing ovation. It remains one of the finest parliamentary speeches, not just of our time, but of all time. This was Robin Cook's finest hour. In that moment, he restored something precious. The idea that truth could still be spoken in politics, that consciousness could still count for something, that Parliament was a voice for the people and the millions who marched to stop that terrible war. Cook's resignation exposed a fracture that British politics has never healed, the integrity gap, that chasm between what governments say and what people believe. Labour's unchecked modernisation had already loosened the bond between principle and pragmatism. For some, power had now become an end in itself. And, hand on heart, I believe something inside the Labour Party died in this period. Like Conrad's Kurtz in The Heart of Darkness, some in New Labour shed their early idealism and couldn't return. And in that void, a new political culture crystallised and took hold. No longer was public service for its own sake the driving force. Instead, proximity to wealth, corporate dinners, boardroom seats, consultancy contracts became the new metric for political and personal success. That's why Peter Mandelson, as US ambassador, wasn't some kind of aberration. He is the embodiment of that culture. He was a mentor to those at the top of this Labour government, someone they admired, someone they deferred to. Appointing him wasn't a mistake, wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was the logical inevitability of the political culture that now dominates this government. Cook saw this coming. He warned what would happen if we abandoned the poorest and hollowed out the party's moral core. Well, that danger is no longer theoretical. It's here and it's on the march. If we are ever to close the integrity gap, we must rebuild trust through honesty, participation, and a culture that welcomes debate rather than fears it. Robin Cook's life wasn't just a warning. It was a guide. His example remains a public resource. He proved that you could tell the truth and survive, that you can choose integrity and still command respect. If there's one thing we must take from Robin Cook's life, and if there's one thing you take from tonight, it's this. Integrity is not optional. It is the precondition for trust, and trust is the foundation of democracy. We need to rebuild that trust, and we need to do it quickly. But what we don't have to do is rely on any single individual to do that. We must stop looking for a knight on a white charger, for someone to come to our rescue. We are the answer. That's what Robin was trying to show us. The whole point of pushing power down, of listening to our collective voice, of giving us transparency and access to knowledge, is for us to use it. This is what socialism has always been about. The belief that together, collectively, we can achieve what no individual can achieve alone. That when we stand shoulder to shoulder, there is no injustice too great, no challenge too vast, no populist too powerful, that we cannot overcome. Thus, to save democracy, we must give power away. And we must believe in ourselves and each other. This is why we must not waste this moment. If we don't deepen democracy, if we don't rebuild trust, others will exploit the vacuum. If we do not offer belonging, the far right will offer its own version, darker, narrower, and crueler. That is why I say to my own party, if Labour continues to shy away from bold reforms like PR, public ownership, and citizens' assemblies, if it continues to cozy up to corporate power while ignoring its members and its class, then it will deepen the cynicism that is eating our democracy alive, and it will be eaten along with it. Integrity is not just moral posture. It is a survival strategy for democracy itself. To conclude, I want us to be clear-eyed about both the threat ahead and the opportunities before us. Last weekend's marches were a warning. At the next general election, we face the very real prospect of a regressive alliance, a bloc of the authoritarian right capable of seizing power on a minority vote. This cannot be a normal election. It will determine whether human rights, decency, and democracy survive the wave of authoritarianism sweeping the globe. If we want to win, not just an election, but the future, we must build a democratic alliance, a common agenda, a culture that puts the people back at the center of power. It's the only glue that can hold the entire center-left together. Robin Cook's life reminds us that this is possible. Cook showed us that courage is contagious. His path is still open to us, but we must choose to walk it, and walk it soon. In researching and writing this lecture, I feel like I've come to know Robin, to get a sense of the man, and now I have, I wish I knew him. It's said that the good die young, and so it was with Robin. But whilst Robin the man has gone, The intellect, the vision, the integrity remain, waiting for anyone in our movement to draw strength from. By his shining example, by his courage, he gave us a path out of the hole that we progressives now find ourselves in. That path, that glowing thread in the long dark, that is hope. And it is that path we must continue to walk in the hard years ahead. Thank you, Robin.